Oh, and Ed. Hey, Ed, how are you?
Good, Maggie. Good to see you. I'm fine. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Madam Chair, we are live.
Wonderful. Thanks, Allison. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Ullman, and I'm the chair of our Environment and Safety Committee here at the City of Asheville. Welcome to our September 26th remote meeting. To all council members and staff, we are all participating virtually. And to help y'all follow along, if you're watching on the video, I'm going to state each agenda number aloud as we go. We're streaming on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the very front of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there, hello. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801. Meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted and you'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now do a roll call. And we have a lot of people here today, which is really exciting. I'll call your name, and then if you could just come off mute and say a quick hello, that would be great. So welcome our Vice Mayor, Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
Also welcome Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Our Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Our Assistant City Manager, Rachel Wood. Maybe she's watching from one of the offices. Also, our City Attorney, Brad Branham, is here.
Good morning, everyone.
We also have our Deputy Police Chief, Mike Lamb.
Good morning.
Our Parks and Rec Director, D. Tyrell McGirt.
Good morning.
Our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herring.
Good morning, all.
Our Assistant Fire Chief, Patrick Criddup.
Good morning.
Our Planning and Urban Design Director, our newly appointed Director, Steph Munsendahl.
Good morning, everyone.
As well as our Urban Forester. Hey, Keith. Keith Atkin is here also.
Good morning, everyone.
And that is our staff list and a lot of VIPs. Good to see everybody. We also have some guests. So we have Patrick Gilbert, who is the chair of our Urban Forestry Commission.
Good morning, everyone.
And along with Patrick, the vice chair of our Urban Forestry Commission, Zoe Hoyle.
Good morning, everybody.
And then from our Urban Forestry Commission, the policy working group is Ed Macy.
Good morning, everyone.
So glad to have such a nice full room of folks. So as is our process, we will start our agenda with our first item, which is public comment. Allison, do we have anyone calling in for our first round of public comment today?
Yes, Madam Chair. It looks like we have 3 at this moment.
Great.
Caller ending in 6029. I'm going to unmute you. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Patrick Conan, and I live in East West Asheville. I'd like to make public comment on item 6, solicitation ordinance next steps. At this point, the technical amendments are in place, and it appears that neither council nor staff want to pursue the proposal to criminalize donations from a vehicle. That leaves just one item on the table, the expansion of high traffic zones, which essentially do one thing, criminalize verbal solicitation. The staff report and data analysis suggest that we're pursuing these efforts out of a desire to increase pedestrian safety. To me, it seems intended to help these arbitrary expansions pass legal scrutiny. But even then, I don't think you're doing a very good job. Personally, I find it hard to see how the data supports the proposed expansion to the River Arch District in West Asheville. I live in West Asheville and walk down Haywood Road almost every day. I agree that our streets, sidewalks, and intersections certainly create hazards for pedestrians and vehicles. And I'd love to see the city do more to address pedestrian safety. However, this proposed expansion of the solicitation ordinance is not the right tool for the job. I encourage this committee to go back to the drawing board and provide clarity to staff and the public as to the goal of this continued effort. If we're seeking to increase pedestrian safety, then let's do a holistic analysis of what is causing these accidents and what can be done to address them. I do not support this committee asking staff to do this continued analysis if their goal is solely to justify a predetermined outcome that would expand the criminal penalties for solicitation in just 2 parts of the city. Our city has a number of public safety challenges, and this committee has made a public commitment to allow additional discussion on some of these topics, such as the Fusus camera system. I encourage this committee to end this distraction and shift our focus back to more important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Allison, let's go with our next caller.
Caller ending in 7629. I'm unmuting you now and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. I really appreciate the comments of the previous caller. I have to say that I'm really having deja vu here. Council, later in this meeting, you're going to see another presentation of what the cops call a data analysis. Doug Oster, who works for APD, makes $78,000 a year and does not know how data works. Just like the time in February of 2021, where he tried to claim that most of the so-called crime in downtown Asheville was caused by people who were camping because they had nowhere else to live. He once again has just drawn circles around busy spots in downtown Asheville and is trying to correlate panhandling with pedestrian motor vehicle collisions. APD will brazenly make up data to try to justify whatever attack on poor people that they're trying to carry out next. Even these charts show that calls about panhandling are drastically down, yet they're going to attribute that to underreporting because even their data doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to support. None of what this presentation you're about to hear should be taken seriously. Once again, they're employing correlation without causation, which is called a questionable cause logical fallacy. Anyone with a basic knowledge of statistics would perform a regression analysis, which you could probably do with restaurants downtown or high traffic intersections. Myself and many of my neighbors know that panhandling ordinance doesn't belong in our community at all, and we certainly don't want it added to West Asheville, where I live, or the River Arts District. Yet you're going to use more false information to try to justify its expansion. And it's disgusting that you use the very real and tragic situation of pedestrians hit by cars in our community, where we have the most pedestrian deaths in the state, to attack people who are asking for help in our increasingly unaffordable city. Meanwhile, you're slashing the public transportation budget and giving more and more money to cops. There are a couple of things I deeply don't understand about you. Even if you don't care at all about people who are struggling to survive, you can't possibly believe that enforcement of this policy will actually change anything. And no matter what you do, cops will say it isn't enough and blame you for it, while you're bringing shame onto our community that could be at the forefront of modeling community care. When you all said you were going to reimagine public safety back in 2020, I was foolish enough to believe that that meant real changes to stop the violence cops inflict on our community. But instead, it meant fake data, PR firms, commercials where cops eat pizza to a backbeat, and a sad bougie dog taken hostage for publicity stunts. Your cops killed 2 more people in our community this week. How many before you all stop believing their lies and start prioritizing safety through community care? Please back away from this ordinance, abolish it altogether.
Thank you, caller. That has been 3
We
minutes.
will keep helping no matter what.
All right, caller ending in 0852. I'm unmuting you and you can now speak. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jensen Gelfond, and I live in West Asheville, and I am calling in regarding the panhandling and solicitation ordinance. I've been thinking a lot lately about both the technical changes and the increased changes that you're also considering. And I'm just thinking about when someone is slapped with the $500 fine and they don't have the money to pay it, what's going to happen to that person and what's going to happen to the city? Because when people can't pay the fine, they get put into the system further, and these people end up having a record. Maybe they'll end up going to jail. Maybe there are going to be many thousands of dollars spent on panhandlers who can't pay their way out of their ticket, being forced through this system to the benefit of virtually nobody, and also deeply inhumane. So I haven't really seen in this committee yet an actual discussion of why there is a panhandling ordinance and actually thinking about it from the bottom up. You've completed this so-called technical amendment, which has already created the additional 8-foot restriction. But I think we need to take a step back and understand, is having a panhandling ordinance in our town really the right way to go? What about, instead of creating high traffic zones, we create high giving zones where luckily you do have access to these people who are in deep need, and we have an ability to give them resources, to give them food, to give them shelter. We know where they are according to your map. And instead of putting our foot down upon these people, I think we need to find ways to actually support these people and support everybody in our community. And I, as someone who lived in Asheville since 2008, would feel a lot safer if I knew that our city council and our government had a plan in place to support these people. And $500 fines that may end up putting these people in an incarceral situation is not going to make me safer, you safer, or anybody else. But radical generosity and actually turning a new page like we want to do with reparations, we could also turn a new page with panhandling and solicitation by actually being kind to these people and supporting them in radical ways instead of stomping our foot down on them and putting them into jail and giving them $500 fines. So I would recommend that we take actually a deep look at why we have a panhandling ordinance and start from the very beginning and work our way back from there. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Madam Chair, we have one more. Caller ending in 2322. I'm unmuting you now. You will have 3 minutes.
Hey y'all. Yeah, I suppose I feel I don't know. I suppose I'm confused about the conception of this idea in these ordinances. I have over the past year or so, couple years, had a lot of experience, and especially West Asheville, with people who don't have houses, who live on the street. And a lot of these people, they're already in a place where they feel shame to ask for help. And, if they end up asking for help, and they get help and they can receive help, I believe, it reinforces a relationship with the community. More needs are met. There's accountability, which, creates safety. There's recognizable faces. And, there's hope. And I believe that, directly contributes to less crime, and just higher levels of trust and safety. I also wonder, where the conversation lies with prevention, not just treatment of poverty. And I'm not so sure this is treatment. I feel like this is just some form of eradicating it in the public eye. But I'd wonder what you guys are doing to prevent this stuff. I just believe by putting in these ordinances and this expansion, we're just perpetuating a system that devalues, people in the community. And I don't see what good that could possibly do when we have a choice to, reinforce humanity and look out for each community member. Yeah, I really hope you'll take into consideration the effects this can have on not just people who are houseless, but also the rest of the community who, is trying to work on these value systems we hope to implement. That's all.
Madam Chair, that was the last caller.
Great. I appreciate all the 4 callers. Thanks for weighing in. And as you know, we also have a public comment at the end. So if you're listening along and want to share further, there'll be a time then. So we will move to our second agenda item, which is approval of the August 22nd minutes. Is that a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Sandra. Great. All right. First and a second. So roll call vote. Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes. Minutes are approved. Okay, now we move on to agenda item number 3, which is the Urban Forestry Commission annual update. I think there's a crew of y'all here, and great, we're going to get a presentation. Take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to you and to the other members of the committee, to City Manager Campbell, and to City Attorney Brad Branham and other staff. My name is Patrick Gilbert, and I am the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. With me this morning is Zoe Hoyle, our vice chair, chair of our Urban Forest Master Plan Working Group, and our representative to the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee, and Ed Macy, who is a retired urban forester, member of Asheville Greenworks Board of Directors, and Greenworks representative to the Urban Forestry Commission, and the chair of our policy working group. You see up there, slide 3 of the presentation, our urban forestry mission statement. This was approved last year by the Urban Forestry Commission. I believe it was in late summer, early autumn. And we took it upon ourselves to do this because we felt it better represented what the Urban Forestry Commission is about and its transformation from its previous iteration of the Tree Commission. Our intent is to hopefully to include this in a package of amendments to the Code of Ordinances, particularly in Chapter 2, Article 3, Division 7, Urban Forestry Commission, along with some text amendments to the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance. This will go forward either as a mission statement or to replace the purpose and powers that are contained in Chapter 2. So we can move on if there's not any questions. Because we have this new reporting process in which boards and commissions are now reporting to newly formed city council committees. And of course, our report is through the Environment and Public Safety Committee. I thought I'd include a couple of slides showing the commission structure, just to give the committee members who might not be as familiar with us a little bit about how we're set up. Of course, we have some, the next slide, please, Allison. Yes. So we have a number of ongoing working groups. These are created as we identify issues that we feel should be pursued either through self-identification or in some cases, issues that are brought to us by people in the community. And then we put together a 4-member working group around that issue. And we do our research and analysis and then work with the appropriate staff to carry through certain initiatives. So can move on if no questions there. The next several slides are priorities, that ongoing priorities that we've been working on not only this year, but actually probably for the last couple of years. The first one is working on some update text amendments for Section 719, the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance. Of course, the City Council unanimously approved the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance in, I believe it was October of 2020. Since that time, we have closely monitored the effectiveness of that ordinance and identified some areas that we thought needed to be updated and changed after 2 years in which this ordinance has been in effect. And we've been working with staff on these text amendments, which we hope will go before the City Council either later this year or early next year. There are no questions. I'll move on. The next one is...
Patrick, I'm sorry. I have a question on the last one.
Sure.
So you can go back to that slide. Landmark trees and provide special removal permitting, provides for canopy replacement ratios for landmark trees. Is this a concept on public property, on private property, on both? And
On both.
Okay, and then right now we don't have any official designation, but does this tie to the Asheville Greenworks Treasured Tree Program?
Well, it does in a sense, but it goes beyond that. And I know that Ed Macy has been working on this specific part of the text amendment. So Ed, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. Landmark trees is a new definition that recognizes some of the more mature and older specimens that are scattered throughout the city, very similar to the Treasured Tree Program, which is a voluntary recognition program for trees on private property. The primary purpose of the landmark trees is to incentivize builders and developers to protect these trees rather than remove them where it's possible on construction sites, giving the builders and developers double canopy credit to help them meet their canopy requirements if they do save these trees, and conversely, having a double canopy replacement requirement if they do remove them. And then for landmark trees on public rights of way, public properties and parks, the idea is to, this was sort of precipitated a little bit by the incidents that occurred along the golf course, but to have a dialogue with the Urban Forestry Commission prior to a decision to remove a city tree that meets that landmark criteria, so that we can prevent some inadvertent removals where that's possible. So that's the whole idea behind it. The term landmark tree is one that we settle on versus other common terms that are used like heritage trees, which might imply more of a cultural significance, or historic trees, which would obviously have more of a historic significance, or specimen trees, which is commonly used with the nursery industry. So this seemed like a pretty good term to use. That's a pretty quick overview. Are there any questions?
I mean, yes, but it sounds like you all are working on it right now. I'm sure that the Urban Forestry Commission, as you work through proposals, you'll be working with the legal department to understand kind of what lanes we have open. So just be interested to learn more as this makes its way towards council. But thanks for the summary, was helpful just to make sure I'm grounded in the concept. Thank you. So you can continue.
And your assumption is correct. We're working with the various departments and we're involving legal in our deliberations. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed. The next slide is chapter 20, which deals with the planting, maintenance, and removal of trees on public property. This is an ordinance that really has not been significantly updated in probably 25 or 30 years. In keeping with the progress that we've made with the tree canopy preservation ordinance, we felt that it was necessary to update the language in chapter 20 to make it more relevant, and make it more modern. And so the policy working group actually came up with a lot of the revised language for chapter 20, utilizing the expertise that we have on that committee. And we have now been in discussions with staff at the Department of Public Works on revising this chapter of our city ordinance. Any questions? The next slide has to do with tree planting amendments. This requires a little bit of explanation. This actually grew out of the open space task force that planning and urban design put together when it was wanting to revise chapter 711(4). And the Urban Forestry Commission was represented on that task force. At the early outset of those meetings, the Urban Forestry Commission had taken the position that we wanted to see whatever changes in the open space language apply to development projects in the central business district. Over the course of the discussion, we got pushback, obviously, from representatives of the development community as well as staff on our position. And I think our position was that if open space was required in the central business district and it would require developers who couldn't meet those standards to pay a fee in lieu, and that would give the city more of a chance to take that money and perhaps buy up some property for mini or pocket parks, and it would be an opportunity to plant more trees in the downtown area. I think if you go back to 2018, when the NASA development group did a heat island study of the city of Asheville, the downtown area was identified as having the highest surface temperature of any area in the city of Asheville. And of course, the downtown is an area for a lot that has a lot of workers, residents, and of course, tourists. So we were thinking of ways of how we could increase the green infrastructure of downtown Asheville. But because of the pushback, we took that under consideration and decided that we would back off of that position if we could get some agreement on how to improve planting trees in the downtown area that would optimize their development into mature trees and provide the benefits that trees do provide for our city. And of course, there are many challenges for planting trees and their survival in the downtown area. So Vidila Safika, who was the staff liaison to the Open Space Task Force, to his credit, saw a lot of merit in that. And he created another task force to which encompassed many of the same people that were on the Open Space Task Force to study the issue of how to improve tree planting standards in the downtown area. Interestingly, about 4 or 5 meetings into the process, someone from the development community said at a meeting, you know, these ideas that we're discussing are so good that it's a shame to restrict them to the downtown area. We should actually be considering expanding this to the whole city of Asheville. And that's the direction that the tree planting standard task force took. And so they have probably done about 30 meetings so far, and pretty much concluded their work on these improvements. So I just wanted to explain that because this is not, unlike the other priorities that we have, this is not solely an urban forestry commission driven initiative. Any questions on that? So the next slide is just some key events that happened so far this year. And of course, you know, we're delighted that the City Council passed a budget that included funding for an urban forest master plan, and even more delighted that we now have an urban forester in Keith Aiken on board to help us move a lot of these initiatives on. So our year-end goals, you can see that on the, and of course that's to conclude a lot of our work on the ordinance text amendments and to really move along the urban forest, developing an urban forest master plan, which would be a critical piece of our comprehensive urban forestry program, and bring that to the City Council as soon as we can. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody has, or I can ask Ed or Zoe if they have, or Keith, if they have anything additionally that they would like to say.
I do not.
I had one question. The appropriate species list, if I'm remembering that correctly, that's a list that we provide to the private community during development projects. And I feel like we were working on that when I was in the sustainability office. Is that, I wasn't under the impression that it's like a permanently iterative list. So, what am I trying to get to? What's it going to take to get that done so that we're using that list to reach these type of goals, or like what's the holdup?
I'll let Ed answer that because he's been working on that.
Yeah, I see that Keith raised his hand too.
Yeah.
I'm not really quite sure where the holdup is. I think it's pretty much ready for prime time. There's, some ongoing discussion about native versus non-native species, and the movement of species as a result of climate change. So, you have to kind of think of lists like these as a snapshot in time to a certain extent, because I think there'll always be new iterations as things change, but it should be pretty close. Last I heard, it should be pretty close to being complete for now. And either way, it is being utilized. So, Keith, you raised your hand.
Yeah, it's I'm actually working on it right now, and had a 2-week setback, so we should have it out in people's hands for review here probably within 10 days, and then hopefully by mid-October, have a final draft out.
That is awesome. That is such a good example of why we're so glad you're here. There's just so many things that, with only so many staff, they can only hold so much, and so glad that that's in your hands right now.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also we have sort of drilled down a bit on this so that we can recommend appropriate species for certain types of areas. For example, trees and parking lots. There are some trees that do well there and some that don't. So we thought, we could break this down so that we could recommend to developers the best type of tree species that would have the best chance of surviving in parking lots. And we've done the same for street trees and, et cetera. So hopefully this will be a good guide for developers in terms of planning appropriate tree species that, again, would optimize their chance of survival and add to our urban canopy.
Thanks, everybody, for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Unless there aren't any further questions, really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you, I think, at some council conversations in the future.
Thank you very much.
Glad you're all here. Let's move on to item number 4. Very interesting topic, single-use plastic reduction project update with our sustainability director, Bridget.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I am Bridget Herring, and I have the privilege to serve as the Sustainability Director for the City of Asheville, and here to give you an update on our plastic reduction project. So if we can move to the next slide. The things that I want to leave you with today is a little synopsis of the project overall and kind of where we are. So reminding folks that this project included a cross-departmental initiative. So our legal team supported us in looking at the regulatory landscape here. Our sanitation folks really took a deep dive into our core services and how these products are captured, or lack thereof of them being captured, within our solid waste system. And then my little team conducted a public engagement campaign to talk to residents and businesses about potential policies and programming that might support reduction in plastic consumption in our community. The project was also successful at eliminating plastic bags from our curbside brush and leaf collection. So you may recall that August 1st, as of August 1st this year, we updated Chapter 15 of the City Code to eliminate those from our curbside collection services. However, unfortunately, due to legislative changes that at the time that I made this presentation were proposed, a little bit more firmed up now, that have preempted the city from taking further action in this space. So we recommend pausing with further policy action. And that we do recommend taking what we've learned through the engagement and some of our existing resources to advance some of the programming we've identified and heard, and roll out some more education and outreach to help our community make this change on their own. So moving on to the next slide. Again, this is just a step of the actions that we take, and I just want to take a moment to extend my gratitude to all of the individuals, businesses, organizations that engage through our public input process. We had over 7,000 individuals and businesses engage with us, and so I really appreciate everybody's time. And you had received presentations previously on the analysis that was conducted, and that is also posted online in case anybody wants to go back for that, both on the committee website as well as on the project page. And I did a deeper dive on what we found during the most recent phase of engagement at the Sustainability Advisory Committee on September 20th. So if anybody wants to hear more about those results, they can go and watch that recording as well. So moving on to the next slide. Again, the major accomplishment that we were able to, or policy accomplishment that we were able to undertake during this initiative was updating Chapter 15 of the City Code. So the sanitation department has been providing free biodegradable bags at a number of community centers and fire stations. So you can click on this link to see where they're all being distributed if anybody wants to go and try them out. They'll be there until supplies last. As the leaves start to fall, I'm sure they'll go a lot quicker. Also, just as a reminder that people can still use a reusable container as well. And the purpose of having the paper and the reusable container, one reusable you can use over and over again, the paper bags are able just to be chucked into the truck and be composted with the leaves as well. So reducing the need for that additional waste. So moving on. So the bad news is that with the budget amendment, or the budget being passed by the state of North Carolina, there's now a preemption bit of language in there that bans local governments from taking further policy action to restrict the use of certain products that revolve around plastics, including plastic bags and expanded polystyrene, which is what staff was looking at. My understanding is that the budget has been passed by the General Assembly and that the governor is going to not sign it, but not veto it either. And so it will be, I believe, law by next week, but maybe our city attorney can shed more light on that if you have questions. But in light of that information, we recommend not going any further down the policy path in this regard. So moving on. So the next steps, we put together a public engagement report that detailed the efforts that we took and lifted up the key takeaways from that. I believe that that's been posted on our website this morning. So if folks want to learn more about that, they can check that out. We do want to reach out to the primary supporters of this policy that brought it to the city for consideration to see if there's opportunity for collaboration in that education and outreach space, as well as maybe some other partners. We've been talking to some of the other North Carolina communities that were also looking at this policy to see if there's any kind of collective response or that we can have to this as well. So trying to figure out who our partners are in this space and what we can do. And then that would mean our team working with this sanitation division and our communications and public engagement department to develop an education and engagement campaign to support voluntary reduction of plastic use. And on the next slide, I have the programming recommendations that came up through the public engagement. So this is listed in order of, popularity from 1 to 5, 1 being the highest, 5 being the lowest. So threw up the top 5 for both the residents and businesses. So we'll be looking at what resources we have and what collaborations we can establish to put some of this programming out into the community and to keep that conversation going and support the folks that want to reduce their consumption either in their own lives or within their business. So that's really the summary that I wanted to leave you with today. High level and quick. So again, the key takeaways are here for you, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I know Brad's here as well in case we have some more questions on the legal side of things.
Thanks, Bridget. I feel like you covered it pretty thoroughly, that this is one of those things where throughout this whole conversation, we've been saying there is a risk that the state will preempt our ability to do this. And lo and behold, here we are. There's a part of me that's like, it's one of those odd things of like, glad this wasn't 11 months from now. I don't know, it's like, time is precious. So here we are, but I think your pivot to educate, since we can't regulate, feels like the right next steps. Yeah, Vice Mayor.
Okay. I was just wondering, basically, have we already put this particular ordinance in effect? How would that legislation that was passed affect that?
Hi, Sandra. I can probably answer that for you. Regardless of when or if the city or any other city around the state had enacted any sort of regulation, and this includes counties as well, any sort of regulation around this, the new state budget, as soon as it goes into effect, will immediately preempt those. So it would essentially void those regulations. If we had established something, it would no longer be in effect once the proposed budget becomes law, which is likely to do in just the next few days.
Thank you.
I know this took a really intensive amount of staff time, and y'all have had a really strong focus on this for more than a year. And I know that can be hard when you're rowing so hard, so fast in a direction to just have kind of the rug pulled out from under you on the state. So I'm sorry for that. I know a lot of really excellent work has been put into it. But I also know we have an overflowing plate of policy on sustainability's plate, things that we're asking of you. So I think this is the time again to just switch to educate and work with our community partners and keep moving forward towards the plethora of things that we're all committed to. All right. If there are no further thoughts on this item, thanks, Bridget. Thanks, Brad. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is Recreate Asheville, or Recreate, shaping our city's parks with Terrell.
So good morning, Committee Chair Ullman, Vice Mayor Kilgore, Council Member Smith. I'm D. Tyrell McGirt, Parks and Recreation Director here with the City of Asheville. This is an update from our July 25th meeting where I came and provided you an update on the comprehensive plan for Parks and Recreation. And yes, Committee Chair Ullman, we are happy to be moving forward with Recreate Asheville, shaping our city parks. Next slide. Some key updates or takeaways from this. Just a reminder, the last Parks and Rec comp plan was completed back in 2009. Last fall, staff started having conversations around how do we initiate or getting our ducks in a row for a new comp plan. An RFP was issued back in January. In February, we selected design workshop, and back on March 28th, earlier this year, this committee, along with council, approved the contract with design workshop to develop the Parks and Recreation system-wide plan. Today's presentation is just to give you an update on the public engagement process that's going to be happening now over the next 8 weeks. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of the comp plan is to create a vision for the enhanced Parks and Recreation system that meets the needs, that meets the current and future needs of the Asheville community. So as we move forward, we're thinking about what we're currently doing, where we are, as well as how do we grow and move forward in the future. Next slide. Some key outcomes we're looking to get from the comp plan include taking a look at what we currently have and assessing what those needs are, comparing on what we're hearing from the community on what they would like to see in their recreation and understanding better what their recreation needs. Keeping equity first and foremost, as we do with a lot of things that we're doing within a department, prioritizing our programs as well as capital investments that focus on maintaining what we currently have and keeping those facilities and parks in good condition. Again, when you're going through a comp plan, a lot of times the focus is on what are the new things that we can do. Our focus here is on how do we maintain what we currently have. Promote new ideas and partnerships, which we think aids in innovation, which is one of our internal goals within the department. Provide sustainable practices and strategies to fill gaps in the desired recreation. And lastly, our outcome is to educate the public and build some community support around recreation needs. Next slide. So the project schedule right now, again, now we're happy to say that as of yesterday was the official kickoff to the public, September 25th through November 20th. So for the next 8 weeks will involve our huge public engagement process. Phase 1 you see here is our community needs assessment, and a part of that needs assessment includes having meetings with having different focus group meetings with various stakeholder groups, both those who are currently utilizing our facilities as well as other potential partners and partners that we're working with within the department. Assist a citywide survey where we go out. All citizens will have an opportunity to provide their feedback through this survey opportunity. And we'll put together some workshops where citizens will be able to drop in and provide their feedback on our Parks and Recreation Comp Plan. Hopefully by the first of the year, we hope to have some clear recommendations based on all of the public engagement that is happening now over the next 8 weeks. And the last part of the plan is to be able to come up with a strategic action plan, have that developed that we can implement the first of next fiscal year. Next slide. So just some things to know as we move forward. Planning for this started back in August. We've already had focus group meetings with various stakeholders in the community. Those stakeholders came from different areas of the community, including recreation, sustainability background, those with high equity visions and priorities, and then placemaking. We kicked off Recreate Asheville website, which is now available. So we encourage everyone to visit the website, which is up and going as of yesterday. There you can find all the information about the survey, the upcoming public workshops, and ways that citizens can get involved, engaged, and provide feedback on this comp plan. You'll see a lot of promotional materials that are going out in the way of banners. You visit any park, there should be some type of signage with a QR code that directs people to the survey. You'll start seeing more yard signs. We're meeting with neighborhood associations. We've sent emails out to all the neighborhood association presidents or liaisons to make them aware. So if they want to invite us to be able to talk about the comp plan, provide some more information, we're making ourselves available to do so. Press releases have gone out as at the transit bus stations. We're trying to get as many avenues covered in terms of getting the word out about the comp plan so people can provide feedback. The survey, again, went out yesterday. There are 2 ways people can participate. There'll be one survey that will go out that are mailed directly to people, and this is just a random mailing that's going to about 1,000 residents here in Asheville. So it's really random, but also any citizen can go to the website Recreate Asheville and fill out the public online survey that kicked off or was made public as of yesterday. And they have until November 20th to do so. Some public workshops that are coming up include us being at the Nature Center on October 5th, over at the Grant Southside Center on October 6th. October 9th, we'll be at Shiloh Community Center. And then on October 12th, we'll be at Carrier Park. And these workshops are an opportunity for citizens to drop in, go through a few exercises, look at some maps, be able to ask questions about existing parks, facilities, provide their feedback that way. But it's drop in during the hours that you see here. This is also included on the website and any of the information that we mailed out and shared with the public. So citizens have just another opportunity to come and provide feedback. Childcare will be provided. We're giving transportation vouchers for those who may need help or public assistance with getting to any of these sites. And we'll have language services provided at least at one of those public workshops. Next slide. Some other engagement opportunities that we're looking at is we have a number of programs that are happening this fall within the department. So there have been some identified internal department-led activities, events, and programs where we know we'll have a presence. Skate night comes to mind. That's something we do internal. We'll have a presence at our skate night where people can come up, ask questions, provide their feedback. We've taken a look at all of the events and festivals that are happening in Asheville now through November 20th and identified some key events and festivals where we also have a presence at. Neighborhood meetings, again, we've been in communication with all the neighborhood groups that are identified with the city. Communications have gone out to them. We have an opportunity to be invited to their neighborhood meetings to answer any questions or to share more about the comp plan. And then lastly, there are a number of farmer markets coming up between now and November 20th where we'll have a presence and be there promoting the survey and getting people more information about the comp plan. Next slide. So just to recap, our last time we went through this was back in 2009. We started the process last fall of getting this comp plan up and going. Design Workshop is a landscape architectural firm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, who we are contracting with to walk us through the system-wide Parks and Recreation comp plan. And right now, through November 20th, we'll have a heavy presence, heavily involved with public engagement part of this process. Next slide. Happy to answer any questions you may have. This is just informational. It's an opportunity for us to provide you, this committee, as well as the public with ways they can get involved with the comp plan. Just a reminder, this is a part of the organizational work plan for the city, and it is a part of the council priority of neighborhood resiliency.
Thanks, D. Tyrell. Lots of good work afoot. Any questions or comments from the team? All right. Thanks for that update. Keep up the good work. Okay, that was agenda item number 5. We have 2 more items. Moving on to agenda item number 6, which is the solicitation ordinance next steps. And I think Brad and Deputy Police Chief Lamb are going to walk us through some of that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning again to all of the council members, all the staff, and everyone watching. I'm going to do my best to bring up the rear in the presentations today and keep things moving along. As Ms. Ullman said, I'm going to be presenting to you in combination with assistance today from Deputy Chief Mike Lamb, an update on the city's solicitation ordinances. I have the first portion of this, and I'm going to start with a few key takeaways. Next slide. Very quickly, as I think everyone on this particular meeting is aware, the City Council recently adopted several technical amendments to the city's existing ordinances. Those are now officially in place. In the wake of this, staff has shifted its focus to begin focusing primarily on providing a great deal of public information and insight around our existing and now updated rules. In addition to this, APD primarily is focusing on collecting some data in order to analyze the effectiveness of those recent amendments. We're using this to try to identify trends to see whether or not any additional legislative action would be necessary. Now, today you're going to receive the first part of that data set with more to come. It is important to note that at this time, staff is not recommending any additional regulation or council action at this time. That includes no recommendation around additional rules on roadside panhandling or vehicular donations. Instead, we are focusing almost entirely on analyzing the effect of the work you have already done with a specific focus on our high traffic zones. Next slide. A quick timeline overview of how we got to this point. As you will recall, I came before you in August of this year with several proposed technical amendments. Now, at that meeting, there were also a few substantive amendments that were discussed. We decided thereafter that it was best to bifurcate that process, continue to move forward with the technical amendments, and take a little more time to analyze the effect and potential necessity or lack thereof of those substantive amendments. On September 12th, following your second reading at the full City Council meeting, you adopted the first tranche of technical amendments. We did not move forward with any substantive amendments at that time. Following this, staff is now recommending that we continue with the process of analyzing the effect of the amendments that you have already made. We want to combine this with some very targeted public outreach to raise awareness for the existing rules. It is our goal to see whether or not what you have done so far is sufficient to meet the public safety needs that we're trying to achieve. Next slide. So what does this look like? Our action plan has a few phases. First and foremost, Kate is going to be taking the lead with providing a public outreach campaign in order to shed light on the not only existence of, but now updated solicitation rules. This is going to be in combination with APD's work to continuously collect and analyze the data to determine how effective we have been to this point. Their focus is primarily on our high traffic zones, something that hasn't been updated in many, many years, to determine, along with this public outreach effort for informational purposes, if we are seeing a positive trend in the reduction of public safety incidences. As far as the potential substantive amendments originally discussed in this committee, staff is not, again, recommending any regulations around roadside panhandling that have not already been adopted. This specifically includes no recommendation to add vehicular donation, regulation, or restrictions. Instead, we want to focus primarily on that public information outreach. We believe that it was clear during the technical amendment process that there was a lack of awareness in many aspects of our community around the existing ordinances as they already were written. We believe that by providing the public with a great deal of information, that alone will go a long way to providing people a good understanding of what the rules already are, while we focus on collecting data around our high traffic zones. This committee is going to receive some data in just a moment from Deputy Chief Mike Lamb, but we expect more data to come so that you will have the ability to analyze the trend or direction that the current amendments you've already made have taken us. Now with that, I'll go to the next slide and offer to answer any questions that you may have about this general overview, knowing that coming up next, I'm going to pass this on to Deputy Chief Lamb to talk a little more about the data analysis effort. But first, again, any questions? All right, hearing none, I will graciously hand it over to Deputy Chief Lamb to take it on to the next portion, but I will be around at the end of the presentation to assist with any questions you may have at that time. Deputy Chief.
All right, thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. So I'll be talking about panhandling and our motor vehicle collisions with pedestrians and how those correlate to each other. Next slide. So our key takeaways, the technical amendments that were recently passed should help clarify the rules regarding panhandling for panhandlers, the public, and also law enforcement officers. Our next steps are outreach, education, and our data assessment of the impacts of those technical amendments. So staff recommends not pursuing additional action at this time related to the roadside panhandling. And so that's, again, giving from vehicles to folks that are soliciting. Staff is recommending a possible consideration of the expanding high traffic zones. So I'll, in a few slides, I'll go over the definition of high traffic zones and where those traffic zones currently exist. Panhandling calls for service have increased over the past 10 years with a rapid decline in recent years. And that, again, that is likely due to underreporting. In some areas known for panhandling, usually along commercial corridors, there are a high number of pedestrian motor vehicle collisions. So based on the volume of nuisance and collisions, current high traffic zones may need to be expanded and additional areas may need to be designated. And we'll discuss that data here shortly. Next slide, please. So here's a 10-year snapshot look at our panhandling calls for service. So again, this is when someone from the public calls in to let us know about a concern or complaint about panhandling. So over the last 10 years, we have received 11,000 calls for service regarding panhandling. You can see in 2020, the number starts to drop. About mid-2020, we started to see a decline in those calls for service. So that graph pretty much shows the first half of 2020. And then we saw a sharp decline in 2021 and 2022. Given the data for calls for service, what it showed us was that the decline corresponded with the change in our reporting protocol for what calls for service Asheville Police Department were going to respond to given our staffing challenges. Next slide, please.
Can I just interrupt? So just make sure. So I remember there being this is before I was in office, that there was a conversation in the media where y'all were saying, look, we're really down staff. So there's certain things that we are not going to be responding to. And that's the tie that you're seeing. So when y'all said we can't handle the volume of all the things, panhandling was one of the things we all deprioritized. And that's where the data connection is.
Yeah, that is correct. Whenever we had our biggest drop in staffing, we did a public outreach, a lot of media on the basically 11 different calls for service that we would not be responding to. And that time-wise coincides with when we saw a drop in reporting and complaints for panhandling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So next slide, we're looking at 5 years of panhandling locations. So on the graph that's there on the left, you can see there's streets highlighted in red are the ones with 10 or more panhandling calls for service within 100 feet of that area. So there were 5,416 panhandling calls for service, and over half occurred within 100 feet of the highlighted streets. So 4 out of 5 panhandling calls for service occurred within 500 feet of the highlighted areas, which that accounts for 80% of our calls for service. And then the highest areas for calls for service, the highest volume for panhandling were along the North Tunnel Road corridor, the South Tunnel Road corridor, Patton Avenue, Brevard Road, exit 44 off of Interstate 40, which is that red splotch that you can see on the far left in West Asheville. So there's Smoky Park and Interstate 40.
Deputy King,
yes.
could you give me an example of the nature of those calls? Was it like obstructing traffic, communication of threat, harassment? Can you give the community an idea of why that call was made?
So yeah, we see a range of reasons why the calls are made. So these are generally the panhandling where it's just designated as and built by a dispatcher as a panhandling call for service. And the reason it's difficult to really capture like a lot of these numbers, because we're missing some numbers also, because it may have been dispatched as a civil disturbance where if somebody is actively arguing with somebody in a car, that may have been, again, categorized as a civil disturbance. We also had a few that were damage to property where someone refused to give money and then the person had damaged the vehicle in some way. And then there could be a couple of other different types of calls for service where it goes to the highest level of what crime was committed or what the complaint is. So it may be more than just panhandling, but it captures a variety of complaints, being a disturbance, a damage, or some argument that took place with panhandling. So these are generally just the calls for service where someone has called in and said, there's somebody at the intersection or on a roadway or on a sidewalk that is panhandling, asking for money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, and then the last two areas where we have our highest call volume is along Merriman Avenue, especially the shallow north-south end of Merriman Avenue, and then also along Hendersonville Road near Mills Gap Road. Next slide, please. So this is a combination of our panhandling calls for service and also our pedestrian crashes. So there on the left-hand side, we have our density map of the pedestrian crashes with panhandling areas highlighted. You can see the pedestrian crashes are there in the red and yellow. And then our reported panhandling areas are highlighted in the green, just like you saw on the last slide. So 1 out of every 5 pedestrian crashes occur within 25 feet. That's a small area of a reported panhandling location. 3 out of 4 pedestrian crashes happen within 500 feet of a panhandling location, which equals to 75% of our total calls. So downtown has the highest concentrations of pedestrian crashes in the city, but it only accounts for 15% of all pedestrian crashes. Several areas have both panhandling and pedestrian crashes overlaid, such as Patton Avenue, Haywood Road, Merriman Avenue, and then North and South Tunnel Road and Exit 44. And there are also areas within the pedestrian crashes that have little or no reports of panhandling, such as Biltmore Village, the VA hospital area, and then also Hendersonville Road near Mills Gap. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at what our current high traffic zones are. So the current high traffic zone is our central business district downtown. It's got the outline there in bold, and there's also our calls for service when it comes to panhandling, with 149 being in that 40 Merriman Avenue area, 51 Merriman Avenue. That's where the 240 west off ramp comes into Merriman Avenue, and they're close to the Shell station. And then you can see.
Is that the same location where we had a pedestrian fatality within this summer? That's that same area, right?
Yes,
that off ramp onto Merriman.
Yes, that was a man riding a skateboard that was struck by multiple vehicles riding in the roadway. So yeah, that was that collision that happened there. And then we have the next biggest panhandling calls for services there along Biltmore Avenue, close to the Hilliard intersection there. Or actually, that's a little further up. That's the Eagle Market Street, Eagle Market intersection with Biltmore Avenue. So, and then on the right-hand side, you can see where our pedestrian collisions have occurred throughout the downtown area, with 11 being in that west of that Patton Avenue corridor west of Pritchard Park. So most pedestrian crashes within the central business district have occurred near high traffic intersections with some limited correlation to panhandling. It may be suggested to extend Zone 1 boundary north into that Merriman Avenue area where you see that 149 calls for service in that shallow north area. Because that is a high concentration of where our panhandling calls for service are. Next slide, please. So this is our second high traffic zone, which is our Biltmore Village area. And again, that's highlighted there in bold. We're looking at the panhandling calls for service. Most of our calls come in at the Meadow Road, Biltmore intersection, which is right there by El Chapala, Wendy's, and the City Stop gas station. The highest that we have within the high traffic zone is there close to the McDonald's Biltmore State entrance area. But those are our two largest concentrations. So that's another place where possibly that zone could be slightly extended north to capture that. And then there's limited pedestrian collisions also within that area. Again, up at that intersection where the 28 panhandling calls for service are, and then spread out there in Biltmore Village and just north of Biltmore Village. Next slide, please. So when looking at the consideration of high traffic zones, we'll look at the current ordinance and what it prohibits. So the first block there is currently what is prohibited all across the city of Asheville. So that is it that the ordinance prohibits the acts of solicitation based under certain conditions, such as physical or aggressive behavior, location, time, or under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance. So it basically prohibits anyone from soliciting for money, but it's based, again, if they're aggressive, under the influence of a controlled substance or alcohol, or they're physically or verbally aggressive. So the next bullet shows the restrictions for what our current high traffic zones are. So it's in addition to the restrictions in the bullet point above, it's unlawful for any person to verbally beg, solicit, or panhandle within any high traffic zone. So this is absent of that under the influence behavior, the aggressive behavior. This is simply verbally asking for money within that high traffic zone. And then there's the note underlined there that solicitation with a printed sign is still permitted. So folks, what we would say flying a sign is still permitted within the area. So there are currently only 2 areas designated as high traffic zones, which is portions of the Central Business District and also the Biltmore Village Historic District. All right, next slide, please. So consideration of additional high traffic zones, council identified possible areas that should be considered for designated high traffic zones, which is the area of Haywood Road in West Asheville and also the River Arts District. So staff will assess the recommended locations and compare with current high traffic zones, as well as other areas across the city. Areas considered will be assessed based on pedestrian crashes, commercial development, and then lastly, calls for service. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to assess what worked well with outreach with the help of Kate and education of technical amendment changes. Over the next few months, staff will be collecting and analyzing data to determine possible areas to extend the high traffic zone designation. Next slide, please. So our key takeaways. The technical amendments should help clarify rules regarding panhandling for panhandlers, the public, and law enforcement officers. Next steps are outreach, education, and assessment of impacts. Staff recommends not pursuing additional action related to the roadside panhandling. And staff is recommending possible consideration of expanding of high traffic zones. Panhandling calls for service have increased over the past 10 years with a rapid decline in recent years due to underreporting. In some areas known for panhandling, usually along commercial corridors, there are a high number of pedestrian motor vehicle collisions. Based on the volume of nuisance and collisions, current high traffic zones may need to be expanded and additional areas may need to be designated. Next slide. Any questions? All right, thank you all very much. And that's the end of my portion of the presentation.
I guess I have just something to discuss, not necessarily a specific question, although it might come about. So looking at this, y'all are saying that staff recommends like continuing to work on this and monitor data for potentially expanding the high traffic zones, which will take staff time and effort. And I guess what comes up for me as I'm hearing that potential to spend more time there is knowing that staff time is our scarcest resource in the police department. I kind of wonder, what is the highest and best use of us doing data and analysis to look at policy adjustments, right? So I don't feel like as a committee, we've had that conversation or been presented with like what the options are. And so for me to say like, yeah, let's continue putting time into researching this particular policy thing. I think that the updates, the non-substantive ones that we did in September make sense. And I think that's progress on behalf of the community. But I have a little bit of a hesitancy to feel excited about continuing to research this particular policy area without knowing what are the other things that we could be working on, because we haven't had that conversation as a committee. Like, what is that strategy conversation? There's updating this ordinance. What other ordinances should we be looking at? What other policy things in our arena? It just kind of feels like there's a piece of this puzzle missing that we as electeds could be weighing in on and contributing to. That makes me hesitant to want to get more information on expanding the high traffic zones, because I'm just not sure if it's the highest and best use of our time, because I haven't really been presented with other like policy things that we could consider to reach our stated council goal. So I have an interest in that, and so that might be like, can we have that conversation and the staff time be put into, here are several different places we could put more time into. Here are several different policy places that could help us reach our goal. That I might be more interested in than specifically data monitoring of this policy area. So curious if that, what other counselors think of that. And then Sandra, I see you also had a comment.
Can we go back to the last slide before the question slide? Okay. Yes. And what I wanted to ask you, Captain Lamb, was basically you were saying that when you have the area, you said some areas of panhandling, usually along the commercial corridors, there were high number of pedestrian, motor, vehicle collision. So I wanted to sort of so you're saying that this is when the vehicles hit pedestrians? Is that what you're saying there?
Yes, that's correct. It coincides with where vehicles hit pedestrians, and then it's not the cyclist data, but there are some like other motor conveyances like skateboards or scooters and stuff like that. But those are very small. So the vast majority of it is when a vehicle hits a pedestrian. Another thing to consider too is we've had collisions where, so like, for example, we had one on Sweeten Creek Road where, the off-ramp from Interstate 40 there on Sweeten Creek by where the new Mission Mental Health place is, where the light turned green, a car started to go and then stopped abruptly to give money, and then the vehicle behind it, colliding with the back because it didn't slow down. So we do have those incidents that have occurred also. So it's not, you got to think about it's not just pedestrian collisions, but it also, we see some motor vehicle collisions associated with the behavior as well.
Yeah, and the reason I was concerned about that, because when we talk about Asheville having the highest rate of pedestrian fatalities and things that we can do, I think it may be necessary if we actually sort of delve into as to why, as opposed to saying that we need to adjust certain things on our streets to help with the safety issue. We need to know really what are the issues. And I think that that to me was just amazing. I would like to know because if we're talking about the high pedestrian deaths or whatever at Asheville, whatever, I think the more information we have in why those are occurring, I think that's good to know. Because it could help us make safety decisions and decisions that we're making as a council for the community.
And that's a great point, because, looking at the pedestrian fatalities that we've had over the last few years, we've looked at the circumstances involved in those fatalities. And unfortunately, probably about 62% of them involved some kind of impairing substances. The others were folks that were, obeying traffic laws and tragically lost their life due to the set of circumstances. But a large portion of them had to do with impairment, either on the pedestrian or on the driver.
Well, thank you so very much. And that actually sort of more or less sort of piqued my interest as to why we need to do it more. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, I think that we need to sort of dive into that. See what's. Thank you.
Deputy Chief, could you answer Maggie's question about how much time and effort it'll take to kind of follow the data trends? Is it going to take extra work, or because I'm with her, like if it's going to take extra time that's unnecessary, I would rather prioritize focus when it comes to public safety right now, and this might not be at the top of our list as a committee.
Yeah, and thank you for that consideration on the best use of resources and staff time. I don't think it's going to take additional staff time for us because it's data that we already collect. It's the public making those calls for service for panhandling or an incident related to panhandling. Officers are already going to take that accident report or the incident report or issue some type of enforcement. So it's staff time that's already committed to those things. It would be back on our data analyst as far as just compiling and putting it together. But as far as officer resources, it'll just be pretty much business as usual for us.
And we don't need to vote on anything here, do we? We just, okay, cool.
Manager Campbell?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I'm hearing from the committee is, when we started this effort, this was an effort related to solicitation. And what we may just want to do is just not have any movement on either the high traffic zones or the roadside panhandling. And let's just take a break and just focus on the education piece of the technical changes and recommendations that have been made. And we'll come back to the committee December, January, and provide you all with some data with just our education. We can also take a look at some of the additional data that we might be able to collect related to crashes if there have been any significant increase. But I do think that maybe we can just pause and just again look at the impact of the technical changes, and I'm hoping that will be adequate. We're hoping before we do any additional policy analysis or changes. Would that be okay with you all? We were just trying to close the loop, but I think you're right, Ms. Allman. Although I think Deputy Chief Lamb is being gracious in terms of we can do it, that attitude, but maybe we should just pause and see how the education and outreach effort goes.
Yeah, that sentiment makes sense to me.
You all are comfortable? Okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, but what would it take just to actually, as far as, like he said, it's not going to take a whole lot of extra work, but just adding another column in the data as to why these things happen. That's real simple.
We can get that information.
Yeah, that would just give us a little bit more information, so yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that okay with the other committee members? We'll just have cause and effect.
Exactly.
not-
Yeah,
okay.
just additional information. That's it.
Sure, we can do that.
I would, yeah, that sounds good for this ordinance. I would also be interested in having a broader conversation of, are there other ordinances that we should be looking at to reach our goal? Because, you know, y'all are the staff who understand how we reach the goal that council set. And I understand that, you know, program expansion is something that we talk about, but, you know, some of that has to be tied to the budget. We're all really thrilled with the community responder program. I think that has been such a success in the community. And I think many of us are excited about expanding it. And we have to have that conversation around resources. But I would be curious, if several public safety departments are sitting down and say, wouldn't it be great if this law was updated so we could do our job better? I'd love to know what that list is and have the opportunity to kind of deliberate. Is it worth us exploring further from a policy standpoint?
Sure, we can arrange for that.
I want to put like my definition to what I'm hearing a pause to be. Like the pause, in my opinion, is to gather more information to analyze the effect of these technical amendments so that we can determine where expansion is best. And I'm saying this because I know this subject has gotten a lot of attention and scrutiny. And I don't want to pull back on the idea that I believe generosity in our community is often exploited. I've seen it and I've heard of it, and in the area of panhandling and solicitation, that is an area where our generosity can be lifted, but it's also an area in our city where it has also been abused. So my pause is not stepping back because of pressure. My pause is taking a step back so that we can make the right moves and make sure everybody is safe.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what is motivating us.
Agreed. All right. Thanks for the presentation, Brad and Mike, and for the dialogue. We can move on to our last and final agenda item, which is a closing round of public comment, item number 7. Allison, do we have any call-ins at this time?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. With that, I believe we are adjourned for the day. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all at the work session. Take care.